Hello and welcome to the ShipShape podcast, a series of podcasts where we meet amazing people and talk about their experiences, personal, technical, and all related to the maritime world. Come and dive in, dive in.
Today on the ShipShape podcast, we got Georgia Tindale. She is a writer coming out of England who's been in the marine industry for some time now, and we're going to pick her brain on how she got into it and, the various tips that she can give if someone were to come in and try to be a writer in the marine industry.
Welcome to the show, Georgia.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yay. So let's start from the beginning. How long have you been involved with boats and marine stuff?
So basically, I started in the industry back in 2017, and I started as an editorial assistant for SuperYacht Times, which many of you may have heard of. They are an Amsterdam-based superyacht publication media company. So I basically finished my master's in medieval and Renaissance literature at Cambridge University in the UK and thought, what can I do that is the absolute opposite of academic writing? Because
I think they had boats.
Not so many in Cambridge. They tend to just have the tiny little punts on the river. But wow. I basically found out that academia was far too isolating and antisocial for me. I wanted to do something that was a bit more had a lot more people in it. So yeah, that's how I kind of fell into it. It was an internship in Amsterdam about yachts, which I was not expecting to end up in at all.
So did you have any knowledge about boating or yachting before you actually started it, or you just saw like the gig and you're like, okay, I'll try this out?
Yeah, basically that, really. I didn't have any prior knowledge of the maritime industry. I was born in Whitby, which is a small town in the northeast coast of England, which does have boats, but, small fishing boats, and I'd never taken much of an interest. So it was more a case of there's a fantastic editorial writing opportunity in a brand new industry that I knew nothing about. Let's just, pardon the pun, dive into it and see if I can make it into a real job rather than an internship, and it all went from there, really.
Were all your friends like, what are you doing?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in the UK it's one of those things where you finish university, you finish your masters, and it's a question of what do I do next? And the logical alternative would have been to get a job in London, in marketing or publishing. But I thought that in terms of an adventure and a new opportunity, this could be something quite special. And I've been fortunate enough that it's kind of served as a springing board for my career ever since, really.
Very nice. And so do you like traveling intrinsically anywhere?
Absolutely. No, I've always loved to travel. And that's one of the fantastic things about working in this industry, is that obviously water tends to connect countries internationally. So you end up getting to travel a lot. And that's a massive, massive pro of having done my job.
Interesting. So because you said you got this internship in Amsterdam. Were you in Amsterdam anyway? And the internship
No, so I was in the UK, finished university, saw the internship, and then thought I'll move abroad. I'd never been to Amsterdam before, so I just took a complete punt, and it luckily was a good idea in the end.
Wow! And so, how much have you? And you ended up on a super yacht, like actually traveling, or did you end up in an office job? Like, how did that go down?
So it's the SuperYacht Times office is basically on one of the most central canals in Amsterdam. So it's just a very nice canal building, and I worked there 9 to 5, like a normal office job. But as I kind of rose up the ranks from editorial assistant to assistant editor to editor, I was gradually given more and more responsibility. And with that responsibility came traveling to various boat shows. So I've been lucky enough to go to Miami, Monaco, Cannes, and Dusseldorf as well, which is also a good show, but maybe slightly less glamorous in terms of its reputation. But yes, so I've been to quite a few shows with them.
So obviously one of the things about the marine industry is you kind of need to know about boats in order to really be like effective at writing. So how did you figure out how to write on boats, and what was that learning process like?
I had some very good mentors when I was at SuperYacht Times. Shout out to Gemma Fottles, who was the former editor. And she was phenomenal in just taking the time over my articles and taking the care to make sure that all the terminology was used correctly. And actually, if you actually, concentrate and make sure that you ask the right people the right questions, even the stupid ones, you can get your head around the yachting terminology and the maritime terminology quite well. And also it helps seeing it. My trips to shipyards and marinas have been really helpful, because then you actually get to see the various parts of the boats in reality, and that makes it kind of easier to conceptualize. Whereas if you're only sat in an office, it can all feel a bit abstract.
So you just had a decent amount of exposure to it right off the bat.
Basically. And, a lot of the content could be a little bit samey, which is helpful actually at the beginning, because then you learn what it means for a boat to be delivered or launched. You learn these terms quite quickly, and then it becomes second nature to you.
So give us, Georgia, like a current situation. What is the super yacht writing industry? Or maybe you can even speak about the broader super yacht industry. What is it looking like right now, especially like post-pandemic and all that?
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be. Very interesting. You've obviously got all the headline grabbing things at the moment with, the war in Ukraine and Russian oligarchs and all that. So that has kind of brought the super yacht industry more into the spotlight than it's used to being. It tends to operate in quite a private, discreet space where it can, for the sake of the owners. But in terms of how the industry's fared with COVID, it's actually fared very, very well. Lots of people decided that, life is too short and they want to buy a super yacht and go cruising with their families. And it's also a very COVID safe way of traveling, because once everyone on your boat doesn't have COVID, then you can be pretty sure that you're safe, because you're not interacting with a larger bubble. And in terms of the brokerage market, it did extremely well. There were record numbers of yachts sold during COVID. And now coming out of it, the question is, can they actually, order books are full until 2026.
Wow.
Supply of materials can be an issue. Actually delivering on those orders will be interesting, especially given the complications in the supply chain caused by COVID, Ukraine, etc. So it'll just be a question of delivering on those promises and those orders that have been made during the pandemic.
So you think prices are only going up?
Yeah. But I'm no market expert. I'm just a mere writer. So don't use me as an indication as to whether you should buy a super yacht, Merrill.
Yeah. Georgia's saying if you want a super yacht, buy it now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Here's a good question. So how would you even define a super yacht? When I talk to people, I'm like, okay, like a boat is under 35 feet. A yacht is over 35 feet, and it goes to some number that no one's really defined. And then mega yacht is this range of boats. And then there's the super yachts.
Right. So I've just had to do a quick conversion because I think in meters. But as far as the industry is concerned, a super yacht is either 25 meters plus, which is 82.021 feet, as you know, or it's 30 meters, which is basically 100 feet. So that's 98 foot. So depending on your definition, it's either, 30 or 25 meters. And then this question of mega yacht, giga yacht, super yacht, terra yacht, whatever, at least in terms of how I see it, it's a super yacht. And then if you're an American, it might be a mega yacht. But anything else is just muddying the waters. I don't like terra, giga, yacht. It just gets a bit ridiculous.
But so for our listeners, so just tell us a little about like what each of these even mean. Like, because Meryl and I know, the smaller boats, the 40s and even the 60s.
Yeah.
We've been on like 100-foot boat. But then what happens once or even like maybe, and we can fill in the gaps about the 40s and 60s and 100s. But what happens once you cross 100 feet? What does that boat even look like? What are the amenities on board?
Yeah. So basically, as far as I see it, once you're over the 25 meters, it's a super yacht, and that's it. That's the end of it. I don't make a demarcation after that point. So it's a super yacht, and then that's it, even if you get up to like 200 meters, for example.
Just the name of a Terra yacht. I mean, I feel like that's such a badass name. I'm going to have to find one of those on the market.
Absolutely. I think I might have just made it up, but certainly I've heard Giga Yacht before.
Sweet.
Damn, that was really good. I
Yeah.
really like your voice. So what is a day in the life of Georgia when you were working for the SuperYacht Times? What would you have to do? What was the day like?
Okay, so basically it was a question of getting myself first and foremost to the office in Amsterdam, which involved the absolutely wonderful commute of a 10 to 15 minute cycle ride through Amsterdam city centre, past the beautiful churches and canals. I mean, it was not really much of a hardship, to be honest. So I'd have my 15-minute cycle to work and then get in, open the inbox, and then deal with whatever had happened in the industry since I was last in the office. So it'd basically be writing up press releases and publishing them and getting things online. And then on more rare occasions, it would be traveling to boat shows and going to the printers to see the issue of the newspaper physically printed, because that was one of the best parts of my job, actually, getting to oversee that physical print process, which is quite rare nowadays, actually, in media. But yeah, largely at a desk, dealing with emails.
And how many articles and press releases would you be working at any given time?
It really depends. That's the thing. With a news job, it depends kind of on the time of year. Like now, for example, is quite a busy time of year. There's lots of boat shows going on, lots of things happening in the industry. And also you have to bear in mind, it wouldn't just be me. There'd be the editors, and then we'd have, at least a staff writer and an intern helping to pick up the articles. So on a good day, we'd probably get between 8 and 10 things online. But that wouldn't all be done by me. There'd be a few of us working on it, and then working on longer term stuff as well, like for the printed newspaper, longer features.
Are there a lot of, publications out there in the super yacht industry, or were you guys one of the bigger ones?
Well, SuperYacht Times is certainly one of the leaders, but there are a few. There's Boat International based in London. They're the main competitor to SuperYacht Times, I would say. But there's quite a few others as well, dotted all around the world. Wherever people are interested in boats and yachts, you'll get a super yacht publication. So, lots in the Med, and also further afield in the States, Russia, other places.
Did you ever go out to Russia?
No, not with work. I went on a school trip when I was about 15, but I haven't been for work, no.
What is your dream gig?
Dream gig? Oh, it would have to be going to Scandinavia on a yacht, staying on a yacht, and then going kayaking on the fjords and diving and exploring that area of the world by yacht. I say that because I know a couple of people who did that, and I was extremely jealous.
Interesting. So Georgia, I want to backtrack a bit. Tell us more about what sort of articles and stuff you were writing for the New York Times. Was it new yachts or destinations or?
Yeah, so SuperYacht Times is primarily a news publication. So their USP, when I was there at least, was very much getting the news online first, which, from a Google point of view is good, because then, you get to the top of Google and you get very good traffic to your site. So that was kind of the priority, was getting it fast. So a lot of it was news stuff for the website, and that would be your yacht deliveries, so yachts being handed over to their owners, yacht launches, yachts being commissioned. So every time a yacht was sold, we'd write about it. Every time a yacht was, moved to its place where the owner would pick it up, we'd cover that. Just basically yachts moving around.
Wow.
And that's interesting to people because they're, such big objects. You wouldn't write that about little boats, would you?
Yeah. And you wouldn't think it would be public information sort of like that either. right?
Well, yeah, it totally depends on the owner. Because some projects they want to keep private and they don't want to announce that it's been delivered or launched, but not all are like that. And it's also quite good for the shipyard from a marketing promotional point of view to be able to wave their flag and say, hey, look, we've delivered this absolutely incredible project, for an American owner who we're not going to name, but, this. So it's finding that balance, I think, between privacy and also them wanting to continue to have work going forward.
Are you afraid of sharks?
Am I afraid of sharks?
Yeah.
I'm more afraid of people, I think, than I am of sharks. If you look at the number of people killed by sharks and then the number of sharks killed by people, I mean, crikey.
Well, I guess what's the difference between a super yacht owner and a shark?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess super yacht owners don't have to keep swimming in order to be alive. And they also tend to have smaller teeth. But not always, actually. That's not true. Don't quote me on that one.
So do you like your profession, the writing profession?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And I feel so incredibly lucky that I get to do something so interesting and so creative and people will pay me for it. I mean, it's incredible. I started off writing professionally when I was about 15 and I'd write articles for people for, £20 an article or whatever. And it's built from there. And it's just absolutely phenomenal to be able to come up with something creative. And every single article, pretty much with no exception, feels like the opportunity to do that for people. And getting the positive responses from clients just makes it, absolutely worth it. Really, really does. I'd recommend it to anyone, even though it can be quite hard to get a decent paying writing job nowadays because there's just so many people wanting to do it.
Well, it does sound cool, so that's probably why everyone wants to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you branching out that way? Are you seeing this sort of like you said, like there's so many writers out there, so the supply is definitely picking up as well. And I don't know about the demand, but like now there's social media, there's other ways to articulate yourself and get your voice heard. How are you branching out?
Well, I think the important thing about how to make sure that you do sort of stand out is both this idea of, branching out and being flexible and being willing to do, all different types of writing. I'll say, if someone says, oh, can you help with social media posts? Can you help with newsletter? Can you help with longer pieces? Just saying yes to any opportunity you get in that sense, because even if you've not done it before, you can pick it up because it's all a very similar skill set. And then you've got another string to add to your bow. So that's good. But then in terms of, you've mentioned so many other writers, the way that I think I've managed to keep work and keep my name, keep myself a little bit known in the industry is just being niche, like be as niche as you possibly can. Because if I wanted to write about, the state of the world at the moment and Brexit or, Russia or something, there's going to be thousands of people wanting to write about the same thing. But if you find your niche and you find the thing that you can write about that is a bit different, clients will trust you to do that. And you're not having to compete with thousands and thousands of other people for the same job. It's just a question of supply and demand. And so you just can't be too picky when you start. Like if I'd said, oh, I couldn't possibly write about boats. I'm not interested in boats. I don't know anything about boats. We wouldn't be where I am today. And now I am interested in boats because you can develop it kind of organically.
Yeah, we've seen all sorts of, wild writing when it comes to boats. Obviously, there's a huge group of people that are just, they hear boat and they're like, oh, well, I could never get into that. So they never get in. But the people that are like, oh, yeah, we can do a ton of research. We'll figure it all out. And then they send you back an article and it makes 0 sense about boats. You've seen
that's
that
happened a lot.
Oh, really?
And it's not just articles though. It's true of just communication in general. Is that like what Georgia was saying? Is that it is a niche. Just communicating well is a niche on its own anyway. And then boating or marine stuff is a niche. And then finding somebody who can boat or rather knows the terms and blah, blah, blah and everything and writes well, is a super niche. Yeah. So, right. So you managed, and then you've even dug further. You've gone into the super yacht industry, which is like super niche, right? So, but you're right then, when you become that sort of targeted, then you can name your price, right? Your own price.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's the thing. You just have to show people that you can do it and have the confidence. And then you quickly find that you can do it and people give you the trust. And I have to say, although it may be surprising, the marine and super yacht industries are some of the warmest, friendliest working environments you can possibly ask for. Everyone is so sort of dedicated and passionate about what they do. And it's just been such a warm, welcoming environment to come into as a graduate fresh out of university. You know, it's not corporate. It's not, you know, dog eat dog world or whatever. It's actually very, very friendly. And it meant that I could rock up to the Monaco Yacht Show as a 22-year-old, you know, not from an extremely affluent background or whatever, and feel comfortable. Because the people there are just fantastic. And as long as you care about the boats and you care about what they're doing, they'll respect that and respond to it. And you can have really, really interesting conversations. Nothing pretentious whatsoever about it, at least in my experience.
And you're right. And a couple of our guests on our shows have sort of mentioned this, so that people who basically live on the water, and if you've got a super yacht, you at least some of the time live on the water, those people are usually on a certain wavelength. You know, they're not overly stressed usually. You know, they're not, again, this is not like a general rule or anything, but versus the dog-eat-dog world that you were describing on sort of land, you know, where everybody's just out to get their piece. Once you're on a boat and everybody's on the same boat, you know, like there's much more camaraderie, perhaps even.
Definitely. Because you have, you know, you've all got a shared experiences and a shared goal of, you know, getting from A to B and not ending up with the sharks. So I think that's probably got something to do with it.
So how were you, you know, doing all this writing and whatnot? How exactly are you promoting yourself? Are you just built up a word of mouth, you know, business model in which people know who you are and they reach out to you, or are you actively like market yourself?
Well, I have to say I am very lucky in that when I left my position at SuperYacht Times, which was on very good terms actually, the boss of the company gave me permission to email basically everyone in my contacts and tell them I was going freelance, which was kind of him actually. And that's all I needed. I just emailed everyone in my contacts with my freelance email address and said, you know, it's been wonderful working with you, seeing you at the shows. I'm going to be freelance. If you want to work with me, you know, you can get in touch. And that's honestly all it's taken, because a few days after I sent that, you know, my inbox was full of people saying, oh, you know, we'd love to work with you. And it was, you know, kind of my old boss to let me do that. You know, he didn't have to. And that meant that, you know, when I was at shows as well, people actually recognize who I am. I'm thinking, what? Me? How do you know me? But I mean, there aren't that many writers in the industry. So, you know, it's maybe not too surprising. But yeah, all word of mouth. I'm hoping to launch a website this year, which will just be very basic sort of landing page, how to contact me, a few examples of work and a couple of pictures. But I certainly haven't had to kind of aggressively market myself, which I'm very grateful for, because that's not really my style.
That's a good place. Yeah, that's a good place to be in.
What 3 tips for someone that is interested in getting into writing and, you know, going down the path that you took? What would they be?
Okay. I'd say the first one I've already mentioned, but yeah, do your best to find your niche. Try and find a thing that you can write about that makes you, you know, useful to someone, because people are not going to pay you to write about things you're interested in from the off. You can make the thing you write about something you're interested in. And I feel I've been really able to do that with what I do, but do not assume that you can write anything and people will pay you for it. Go the other way around, find your niche. And then also, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but don't be too precious. You will be edited, and that's a good thing. You know, I've spent my whole career being edited, and now I edit as well as one of my services. But don't get precious about your writing, because it's going to be edited for a reason. There will be occasions where it gets edited and it's worse than what you sent in. And again, take the money and accept it, because that's part of the process. The client knows best, even if they don't.
Even if they don't. If you want the gig again, just give them what they want.
Absolutely. And then third one, just again, slightly cliche, but read as much as you can. Like, honestly, I do put down my moderate success in writing to the fact that I read absolutely voraciously as a child. And I hope that kids still do read. I don't know. I don't have children myself, but it really, really helps if you have a wide vocabulary, because, you know, sometimes you'll have to write the same story about a yacht being delivered, and it makes it a lot more interesting to the wider world if you've got many different ways of saying that. And that will only come by reading widely and exposing yourself to how other people do things, basically.
This show was sponsored by
MITA, the Marine Industry Digital Agency. We know a lot about the marine industry, whether it be service, sales, repairs, we have it covered. Right. How are we going to help you? Easy. We are MITA, the Marine Industry Digital Agency. Our marine knowledge, whether it's basic web development, adding video, sprucing up that tired website, new feature or app created for your customers' phones, we have it covered. Traditional marketing, advertising, or PR companies don't know anything about the marine industry, but we do. Check us out at www.mida.pro or drop us an email at info@mida.pro. Let's discuss how we can improve your brand, increase your sales, and take you to that next level.
Welcome back to the ShipShape podcast.
Good stuff. Okay, so Georgia, I do want to dig a little deeper into a couple of things. One of them, and again, and you tell me how you feel about this, but like on smaller boats, is already about like pure like attention to detail, especially the people who climb up the ladder. You know, like they just have this eye for, you know, detail. They just see everything, and it's just beautiful every single time. And how important is that, even in what you're doing in writing, especially when you're dealing with, you know, these super wealthy super yacht clients?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Absolutely vital. I mean, one of the amazing things about a super yacht is basically, obviously money is an object to some extent, you know, there is a budget, but in some ways compared to other products, money is no object, which means it's an opportunity for talented craftsmen and women from all around the world to really, really strut their stuff and show what they can do. And that is one of the most amazing things about a yacht, is it is this, you know, beautiful object that's been handcrafted a lot of the time, with all the tiny little marble details and, you know, little details in the bathrooms, and even the way the windows are curved. Just so many things are there and are done with such care and such attention, because, you know, they're not having to worry too much about every single penny. So yeah, it's absolutely vital. And then in terms of how you write about a boat, it's the same thing. You know, one of the striking things about working for SuperYacht Times was how seriously people took our articles. It was incredible. I mean, if I wrote an article and said the boat was 26.3 meters and it was actually 27, I would sometimes get a call from either the shipyard or the broker that had sold the boat saying, by the way, you got the length of our boat wrong. You know, people really do care about these things because it's such high value products and products that they really, really care about. And so that is reflected as well in the care that you need to take when you write about it. But that I think is a great skill for any writer to learn, that, you know, you can't be sloppy. These things matter because it's people's livelihoods, you know, whether I write about a particular designer's thing that they've done on a yacht or not might be the difference between them getting the next job or not. You know, you can think about it that way.
True. And you sort of alluded to this before, but did you actually get to propose your own articles and stuff?
Yes, that was one of the great things about SuperYacht Times, is because it was very much a space where I got to grow from effectively an intern up to an editor. There wasn't a strict structure of how things were done because it was very much growing. It's not really a startup anymore, but it very much was when I was there. I did get to have a lot of control over the content, and the newspaper that they print now quarterly, but used to be every 2 months, I could basically set the tone of a lot of that content working with Maritime, who runs the company. But yeah, a lot of my stupid ideas would make it in there in the end because there was no one to tell me no.
Maybe some tips on that though, like how does a writer sort of approach, I don't know if you'd be considered cold calling, but for all intents and purposes it might be, and say, hey, you should use these articles. How does one do that?
Well, the thing is, because SuperYacht Times has a really fantastic reputation, it was tended to be the other way around. People would come to us and say, please, will you write about us? So it was more, it'd be a question of finding out what's actually interesting, because they all think that they're interesting, of course, and they are to some extent, but there are only so many topics in the industry. So you have to think about how to make it different from last year's, yachting publication that covered quite similar boats. But there was never a problem getting enough content. The main thing is, how do I make this content different to the 26 other articles that have been written about this boat? And that's the challenge, actually. That's the fun challenge of it.
And what about the freelance side of it?
Yeah, in terms of pitching to people.
Pitching, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just ideas are very much important currency. And one of the lessons you have to learn is not to give it away. That's been one of my learning points, actually. That if I propose a load of articles to a publication, they may well say, brilliant, we'll do that in-house. Thank you for the ideas. That's happened to me before. So you have to be quite careful, I think, with pitching too much, because coming up with a fun article about a boat can be quite difficult for people. So yeah, but in terms of finding enough work, I'm lucky enough that that's not really been an issue recently. But yeah, it's just having a decent, strong, succinct pitch that makes the client's life as easy as possible. So saying, I've got these people lined up, I can do this, it'll be interesting to your readers because this, can I do it? Chances are they'll say, yeah, go on then.
You made it sound really simple there. Just like a 2 + 2 = 4. Yeah. Wow. So you have this down like a science then. Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, and then Meryl, you had a question?
Yeah. So what other things are you doing outside of the marine industry that's writing involved?
Well, I do a bit of other writing that isn't marine based. Yes. So I've recently been working with a publication called Parliamentary Society magazine. And I actually did one of my favorite interviews, which was with a Saudi journalist. And it was basically about the time he got accused of being a terrorist by one of our wonderful tabloid publications. I think it was the Daily Star in the UK. And it was basically an article looking at how he dealt with being branded a terrorist, for which there was absolutely no evidence, by the way. And that being in some of the tabloid press, and how he managed to contain the story. And the fascinating thing about this story was that he did manage to contain it, and basically rang up the rest of Fleet Street in London, where all the publications are based, and said, please don't publish this story. It's not true. And they didn't. Nowadays, that would not happen. If that kind of slur was made and it was put on a social media platform, for example, it'd be much, much harder to contain the story. And I thought it was a really interesting reflection on, disinformation and the spread of that, and how you can or can't contain it nowadays versus back then.
Well, when I have some cover-ups to do, I'm going to definitely hit you up.
Yeah, do it.
Georgia's saying it's not possible anymore.
It's not possible anymore.
Yeah, don't do bad stuff. That's what she's saying. Okay.
Or don't even get accused of doing.
Yeah,
bad
don't
stuff.
even.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yep, you're right though.
But outside of the industry and outside of writing, I'm also training to be a counsellor or a therapist. I'm doing that at the moment, so that's my kind of other stuff alongside the writing, and they work quite well together, actually, surprisingly well.
I bet they do.
I mean, it's all just talking to people and listening to their stories. So, there's quite a lot of overlap.
Write better copy, and the copy helps you, see what, especially now, like you said, with everything online, you can almost sort of see which copy does better than other copy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
What is one thing that you must never do when you're, in the marine industry as a writer?
Well, one thing you must never do is commit to too many things that you can't actually deliver on time. And I say that having done that before. But yeah, basically it's basically a question of knowing yourself and being realistic about how long something actually will take you to do. Because the worst thing, you don't want to overpromise to a client and underdeliver. That's a pretty big no-no. But also, in my experience, people tend to be very understanding. If you just communicate with people and say, look, XYZ has happened, the article's going to take just a little bit longer, they tend to be a lot more responsive. So I'd actually change that to say, one thing you must never do is ghost a client.
Yeah, that just gets nasty.
Also not a fan of ghosting in personal life as well. That I think the pandemic has made a few people a little bit keen on ghosting, and I think it's can be a pretty immature way of dealing with someone that you don't want to deal with.
True that. So, maybe Georgia, tell us about the best gig you ever had. What was the funnest? Did you maybe it involved 300-foot boat or something?
Yeah, I have to say, the most kind of intellectually stimulating thing I've had to write was probably that thing I just described about the Palestinian thing.
The Palestinian thing.
Exactly. But in terms of the most fun, I quite enjoyed going around SuperYacht. It was called Tiz at the time. The name has now changed. It's an 111-meter Lursen yacht. And the interior of it is basically like it's come out of Versailles. It's absolutely stunning. It's the most ornate thing you've ever seen. Helipads, just absolutely everything you could possibly want on board a super yacht. And at Monaco, I got to go around and basically just bask in how ridiculously beautifully ornate this thing was.
Take notes. I need to take notes and pictures and
exactly.
Interesting.
And it was like being in a palace. It really, really was. And after that, actually, I got a little bit complacent because I thought, you know what, I've seen it. I don't need to see any more boats. I've seen the biggest, but it's very much not the biggest actually. 111 meters is big, but there's bigger out there. So still more to see.
To see.
What's the worst job you've ever had?
Worst job? I think the hardest bit of doing any news writing is probably the fast turnaround with articles. So I think the hardest parts of having worked for a news publication is just that thing of having to turn an article around very quickly whilst at a boat show. It can get quite stressful because there's no internet, but you feel like it needs to get online within 20 minutes or else you'll lose your top spot on Google. And really, in the scheme of things, it's not a big deal. But when you're like 20 years old and really, really wanting to do well in your job, it can be very stressful. But now I don't do breaking news in the same way. So it's a little bit more laid back. But I really, really do respect the people who have to cover news in any form at that pace because it can be relentless.
So have you ever lost a gig? Like what happened?
I think I've never lost a gig, really. I have...
100% success rate. Congratulations.
Well, I'm not sure. I've been approached and then given them my rates and then they've gone for someone cheaper. So I don't know if that counts as losing a gig. But I've never started something and then a client said, you know what, we don't want to work with you anymore. It's more been that their priorities have been, saving money, which is absolutely fine because there are people who will do what I do for less. And that's fine. But I back myself. So, and luckily there seem to be a few people who do as well, not just me.
And so where are you on that debate? Some people would be like, you should tell people your prices straight up front. Some people are like, price is the last thing you discuss. Where do you find yourself on that?
Well, I do have a lot of Dutch clients, so I can't get away with not telling them my price because they're incredibly direct. So that doesn't work. But no, I think up front, really, I think, if someone emails and asks the rate, I'll say this is my rate because at the moment, that's fine. There's enough people who are happy. And I know it's a fair rate. I know that I'm, in representative of how other people do it in the industry. So I think the more transparency, the better. But also you need to be flexible, if they really can't pay that and, I'll need to see their bank statements to prove, no, I'm joking. But, have some flexibility, but you don't want to sell yourself short because you're doing what you're doing for a reason. You're good at what you do. And also, you're not paid for the time you're not working, if that makes sense. There's so much time doing admin, emails, chasing invoices, all that. And that is not factored into your rates unless you make an active effort to do so. So it may sound like a big number to you, but when you think about all the time you're not getting paid for, it suddenly starts to make a lot more sense.
But so shed some light on that because you had a 9-to-5 for years and then, and it's almost like you're entrepreneurial at that level, right? Is that you took the jump and you're like, I'm going to do my freelance thing. Yeah. And now, that fixed income is gone, like how is that jump for you and like, how have you adapted to it?
I mean, it is definitely a jump, but I also love, it's a personality type, I think. I'm very much love having control of my own destiny, which is a bit of a, again, slightly cliche thing to say, but that's how it feels, because everything you're doing for yourself and for your client. So, you know, you get a little dopamine hit, you get a little reward for every single article you publish, because, you know, you charge per article. And so if you work hard at what you're doing, you will get rewarded for that. Whereas in a 9-to-5, it doesn't necessarily go that way, because, you know, you're given a fixed amount of money no matter what you do, which means all those cliches about standing around the water cooler, which aren't really so much of a thing now we've had COVID. But I just love the idea of, you know, I can take the morning off, but then work really, really hard into the evening if I need to, and no one can tell me otherwise. So maybe I'm completely unemployable from now on. But that freedom, honestly, you know, I've not made millions and millions of euros in my first year of freelance, as is often the case. People don't, you know, it takes time, but that freedom is worth its weight in gold.
And you're saying the ceiling is just a glass ceiling. It could be millions and millions.
Well, let's see. But it doesn't. It doesn't.
No, that's good to
be.
hear, right? It was almost like teachers and writers and stuff weren't making enough money, and now they are. I guess, I don't know.
I think that, to be honest, in my experience, the people who seem to be making the most money doing writing are doing it on a freelance basis. Because
that's a good way to look at it. Yep.
Yeah, because I think a lot of publications don't value it as much as they could. But when you're doing it freelance, you value yourself, and you can set your rate, and then people will either be prepared to pay it or they won't. But some entry-level publishing jobs in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the US, but they're absolutely terribly paid. And again, it's supply and demand. People are willing to do it for that, so they won't be paid any more than that, really.
That's an interesting way to look at that. So yeah, so let's maybe start wrapping stuff up. Georgia, any pro tips you would like to share with us on your way out?
I think I'd just like there to be a bit more awareness of the fact that marine and yachting jobs actually exist. So I'm trying to work on that by working, you know, with various recruitment agencies within the industries to write their blogs for them, to try and make the industry more accessible. And I know the word accessible and super yacht may sound like somewhat of a contradiction in terms, but if you think about it,
but they need a crew, right?
Yeah,
for example,
it's the ideal graduate job. This is what I mean. Or even just a gap year job. You finish school, you don't know what you want to do. You could go work in a pub or a restaurant in your local town, or you can learn, you know, you can learn on the job, get very good tips, so I've heard, travel around the world, learn some skill sets, and get qualifications that you can actually use back on land. You know, if you gain these hospitality qualifications and, you know, learn how to do laundry really well, learn how to do all these things, or technical things in terms of the actual, you know, operation of the boat, you can use those skill sets back on land, have a few months with your friends traveling the world, and then, you know, also save for a mortgage or a house deposit. I do know people who've got their entire house deposit from, you know, working a couple of seasons on a boat, and you will not get that from working in a pub. So I think there's just not, and also there's a massive shortage of crew at the moment. I don't know how it is outside of the super yacht industry, but there is actually a big gap in the market for crew. So I think it just be good to have a bit more awareness.
Right, is that it's such a super niche that like 0.01% of people are ever going to see that. So if you manage to, you know, get a seat on a boat like that, it'd be a great experience.
Absolutely. And the thing is, obviously, buying a yacht, that is always going to be niche. I will never own a yacht. Well, never say never. But I am unlikely to ever own a yacht. But I have been on them, and I have been able to see it and experience it and meet the craftsmen and women and write about it, because it's accessible in that way. You know, you can be involved in the industry and participate without having to be, you know, a millionaire or a billionaire. And I completely understand why people don't know that, but it would be good if more people did.
Well, don't worry, Georgia. I'll invite you onto my terror yacht.
Thank you.
So, Georgia, where can people find out about you and get a hold of you?
Well, as I said, I don't quite yet have the website ready, so it would have to be very old school, just an email. So the email to reach me for any sort of work would be just my name, georgiatindale@gmail.com. I keep it simple in terms of how to get in touch, but there will be a very exciting website launched hopefully this year, and then that'll have all my stuff on it.
Awesome.
Let us know if we can help you with anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, best of luck, Georgia. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with all your super yacht adventures, okay?
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have you back at some point.
Check back every Tuesday for our latest episode and be sure to like, share and subscribe to ShipShape.pro.